because you see, when you have a hobby like mine, there's nothing like quality alone time. So I've got some great songs for you this year. I hope you like them. Merry Christmas. See you soon.
Merry Christmas, everybody. It's Dean, and welcome to my home here. We're in my office, in my library, and I thought for Christmas Eve that we would just meet in this little place so I could tell you a little bit about what Christmas means to me this year. I'm going to give you a couple of different words, 3 words. The 3 words I want you to think about are suboptimal, subnormal, and sublime. Because you're having one of those 3 this Christmas. In fact, there's no doubt about it, everyone is having the first one, the subnormal. But let me read to you from Matthew chapter 25, verse 35. The words of Jesus. He says, "For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home." Now, I know that with the COVID virus, it's going to be a different Christmas this year. It's probably not going to be a packed house for many of you. But I love the words of Jesus when he was describing how Jesus people, when we welcome others, when we take care of others, we're really taking care of Jesus. If ever there was a holiday that should remind us of that, it's Christmas. But for almost everybody that's going to watch this, this Christmas has been suboptimal. Suboptimal by definition means that there's something you want it to be, but it's way below that. Sub meaning underneath. Optimal meaning almost perfect. It's suboptimal. In this house, if you could walk through this house, the house is clean, it's nice, it's frankly the way it looks every day. But you'll notice there's no Christmas decorations. In fact, there's no Christmas tree. Because for this family, I don't know about your family, but for this family, 2020 has been crazy enough that we didn't even get around to putting the tree up. We've got a tree. In fact, we've got multiple trees that we could put in multiple different rooms. In many years, we've had a tree up, 2 trees up. But this year, it's not just suboptimal, it's subnormal. Which means underneath what we even normally do. It's not only is it not the best, it's underneath what's normal. To be subnormal means like we're not even doing the basics. And you think about all the families around the world, we're not having a big dinner with grandma and grandpa because we're trying to protect grandma and grandpa. Or we're not traveling, we're all the things we're not. So how can you have Christmas when it's just not a normal day? No Christmas tree in the Curry house. No gathering at your place. Some of you will be attending Christmas Eve services. Some of you are watching online, so it's just different. It's just different. Is it possible to have the last word, the sublime? Do you know what sublime means? Sub meaning underneath. Liminal meaning of the limit. Same word where you get the limit. So it's just under the maximum. When something is sublime, it's so perfect that if there was any more, it would be too much. One drop less and you would feel cheated. This is just sublime. Sublime. Can we have the sublime even while we're having the subnormal? That's kind of contradiction, and I was a philosophy major, so I like to ask myself those kinds of questions. How can we do Christmas? How can we have the spirit of Christmas when there's no Christmas tree, when there's no dinner, when my kids are in Los Angeles? My daughter's with us, but my son and daughter-in-law. So, it's going to be there'll be nobody in this house on Christmas Day. So it's like, wow, what do we do, I want to kind of think about that for a second by reading you an old story. Tolstoy was a Russian writer and one of the most famous writers of all time. Perhaps you've heard his name. Maybe you've read some of his stories. But he wrote a Christmas story one time about a man named Papa Panoff. And Papa Panoff was a shoe cobbler. He made shoes. And he wrote this little story about Papa Panoff. I'm going to read it to you from my little pad here. And Papa Panoff had Jesus appear to him. One day, it was Christmas Eve, and Papa had just finished making shoes all day, and his wife was no longer there. She had died. His kids had now grown, and they weren't home anymore. He wasn't going to see them this Christmas, not unlike your Christmas. And so Papa sits down, and after he's finished his day and it's Christmas Eve night, he decides to break out the Bible. And Papa reads the Christmas story, and he reads about how when Mary and Joseph went to town, they couldn't find a place to stay. And so Papa says out loud as he's reading the story, "Oh, if he had come here to this little Russian village, I would have given him a bed. I would have covered them with my patchwork quilt." And then he reads on, and he reads about the wise men bringing them a gift. And he says, "Oh man, if Jesus had come here, what would I give him?" He's looking around his shop, and he sees he had made some years ago what he considered to be the perfect pair of shoes, the best pair of shoes he had ever cobbled. And so he got those out of the box, his work of art, and he said, "I think I would have given the baby Jesus these shoes." As he was kind of thinking about that, he began to get sleepy and drift off, and the words on the page of his Bible began to get fuzzy, and then Jesus spoke to him. Jesus appears to this old shoemaker, and he says, "Papa, you think you would greet me? Do you think you would have had a place for me, had a gift for me like the wise man?" He said, "Since you desire me to come so much, tomorrow, Christmas Day, Papa, I'm going to come to you." His wife wasn't there. His kids weren't there. He had no guests coming, but Jesus was going to show up Christmas Day. He said, "I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to look like, but look for me, Papa, and you'll find me." That's the lead up of the story. Let me read you exactly the end. It says, "So at last, when Papa Panoff awoke, the bells were ringing out and a thin light was filtering through the shutters. 'Bless my soul,' said Papa Panoff, 'it's Christmas Day.' He stood up and he stretched himself, for he was rather stiff. Then his face filled with happiness as he remembered his dream. This would be a very special Christmas after all, for Jesus was coming to visit him. How would Jesus look? Would he be a little baby as he was the first Christmas? Would he come as a grown man, a carpenter? or the great king that he is, God's son? He must watch carefully through the whole day, though, so that he would recognize him however he came. Papa Panoff put on a special pot of coffee for his Christmas breakfast. He took down the shutters. He opened up the window. The street was deserted, so no one was stirring yet. No one except a road sweeper. He looked miserable and dirty as ever, and well he might. Whoever wanted to work on Christmas Day and in the raw and cold and bitter freezing mist, who would want to do that this morning? He opened the shop door, Papa did, letting in a thin stream of cold air. "Come in," he shouted across the street cheerily. "Come in and have some hot coffee. Keep out of the cold." The sweeper looked up, scarcely able to believe his ears. He was only too glad to put down his broom, come into a warm room. His old clothes steamed gently in the heat of the stove as he clasped both red hands around the comforting warm mug as he drank. Papa Panoff watched him with satisfaction. Can you picture it in your mind? And every now and then his eyes strayed to the window. He never wanted to miss his special visitor. "Expecting someone?" the street sweeper said at last. So Papa Panoff told him the story. He told him about his dream. "I hope he comes," the street sweeper said. You've given me a bit of Christmas cheer I never expected to have. I'd say you deserve to have your dream come true." And the sweeper actually smiled. When he was gone, Papa Panoff put on cabbage soup for his dinner, then went to the door again. Scanning the street, he saw no one. But he was mistaken. Someone was coming. The girl walked so slowly and quietly, hugging the walls of the shops and houses, that it was a while before he noticed her. She looked tired, and she was carrying something. As she drew nearer, he could see it was a baby, wrapped in a thin shawl. There was such sadness in her face and in the pinched little face of the baby that his heart went out to them. "Won't you come in?" he called, stepping outside to meet them. "You both need a warm seat by the fire and a rest." The young mother let him shepherd her indoors and to the comfort of his armchair. She gave a big sigh of relief. "I'll warm some milk for the baby," said Papa Panoff. I've had children of my own. I can feed her for you." He took the milk from the stove and carefully fed the baby from a spoon, warming her tiny feet by the stove at the same time. "She needs shoes," said the cobbler. But the girl replied, "I can't afford shoes. I've got no husband to bring money home. I'm on my way to the next village to try to get work." A sudden thought flashed through Papa Panoff's mind. He remembered the little shoes he had looked at last night, the perfect shoes. He had been keeping those shoes for Jesus. He looked again at the cold little feet and he made up his mind. He said, "Try these on her," he said, handing the baby and the shoes to the mother. The beautiful little shoes fit perfectly. The girl smiled happily, and the baby even gurgled with pleasure. "You've been so kind to us," the girl said, and then she got up with her baby to go. "May all your Christmas wishes come true." But Papa, he was getting discouraged. He was beginning to wonder if his very special Christmas wish would come true. Perhaps he had missed Jesus. He looked anxiously up and down the street. There were plenty of people about, but they were all faces that he recognized. There were neighbors going to call on other families. They nodded and smiled, and they wished him Happy Christmas. And then there were beggars. And Papa hurried some of them indoors to fetch some hot soup and a generous hunk of bread, hurrying them out again in case he missed his important stranger, Jesus. All too soon, the winter dusk fell. And when Papa next went to the door and strained his eyes, he could no longer make out the passers-by. Most were home and indoors by now anyway. He walked slowly back into his room at last. He put up the shutters and he sat down wearily in his big armchair. So it had just been a dream after all. Jesus had not come. Then all at once, he knew he was no longer alone in the room. He could feel something. This was not a dream, for he was wide awake. At first, he seemed to see before his eyes the long stream of people who had come to him that day. He saw again the old street sweeper, the young mother, her baby, the beggars that he had fed, and as they passed, each of them now whispered to him, "Didn't you see me, Papa Panoff?" "Who are you?" he cried out in bewilderment. Then another voice answered him. It was the voice from his dream. It was the voice of Jesus. And he said, "I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was cold and you warmed me. I came to you today, Papa. I came to you today and every one of those that you helped and welcomed." Then all was quiet and still. Only the sound of the big clock was ticking. A great peace and happiness seemed to fill the room, overflowing Papa Panoff's heart until he wanted to burst out singing and laughing and dancing with joy. So he did come after all, was all that he could say. Isn't that a great story? It's an oldie, but that's what it's about. It's not going to be normal. It's not going to be optimal, but it can be sublime if you get if you can see Jesus in the things that you've done. I want to say a particular Merry Christmas to all of you who are part of regularly our church. It's just a small gathering of Jesus people. We do 4 experiences a weekend. Compared to what Jesus is doing around the world, it's just a drop in the bucket. But you've been Jesus this year. We've done almost $70,000 of food give-outs. We were able to partner with the Farmers to Food program during the middle of the worst part of the pandemic shutdown. We gave out thousands. I think it was 3,500 boxes of food. It's crazy. That alone was a separate $70,000, $75,000 worth of food that you distributed. Amazing. Just last week, we gave away 300 Christmas hams to families that wouldn't have had it if it hadn't been for you. So if your prayer was the same prayer of Papa, hey, Jesus, come to this family. Come wherever. Some of you are going to be having less than you want to have. You're unemployed. You're going through hard times. You're not with the people you love. It's okay. Let's find a new way for it to be sublime. Because we have Jesus here. May he fill this room. May he fill whatever room you're in. Merry Christmas, everybody. Will you pray with me? Jesus, on that Christmas day, we can hardly wrap our mind around it, what it must have been like. The supernatural angels appearing. The supernatural God coming through a woman. The supernatural revelation to wise men from Persia to walk for months to get there. The poorest of the poor, the shepherds, the outcast, the people outside the city, and you appear to them. You don't appear to the kings. You don't appear to the important people. You appear to the Gentiles, to the pagan, and to the poor, and they got to see you first. Lying in a barn among animal waste and food, and there you were. So if you could show up in those circumstances, you could certainly show up in ours. may you bring a sublime, almost perfect Christmas in the middle of our imperfection. Bless every person here, sinner and saint alike, for it truly is the sinners that make the greatest saints. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Merry Christmas, everybody.